Today on the Saved Gen Z, I sit down with conservative columnist Barbara Kay.
Many of us who do or did write for the National Post are known to be outspoken on certain contentious issues, and that was considered part of the National Post brand. The impetus, and of course the founders of Black Lives Matter, BLM, they make they don't try to hide the fact. In fact, they're very proud of the fact that it is a Marxist movement, a revolutionary movement.
Yeah,
And like all revolutionary movements, the first thing you want to do is you want to start from zero. So that means erasing the past, because you believe that everything in the past was wrong, and you have the answer to make things right. The only things that is going to change this system is people voting out those who are the vehicle for this rotten system. We're in the midst of a delusion, a mass delusion. It has to come to an end. PS is essentially because they don't believe in the two-state solution. They believe in
yeah.
the erasure of Israel as a homeland for the Jews.
hmm
If you don't believe that the Jews deserve a homeland, then you really have to examine your motives for thinking that.
Hi, and welcome to the show. Today I have the great honor of bringing you a great interview with Barbara Kay. She is a renowned conservative columnist who has written on many issues. She used to write for the National Post, but recently left. She writes for the Post Millennial as well as the Epoch Times. And on her website, you can also find other blogs and articles that she has done. And today she will be joining me to discuss a variety of topics, from cancel culture to free speech to gender issues to Zionism, racism, and much more. So stay tuned. This is going to be a great interview. Before we get started with our interview, please subscribe if you haven't already and consider hitting that notification bell. Barbara, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Maybe how about we start off with you telling us a bit about yourself and maybe why you decided to leave the National Post.
Okay, I did leave the National Post recently after having been a weekly columnist since 2003, and before that, what you would call a frequent contributor since 2000. So I had felt very comfortable writing for the National Post, I would say, for up until a few years ago. I wouldn't say I was uncomfortable a few years ago, but I did notice there was a kind of change in the atmosphere. Many of us who do or did write for the National Post are known to be outspoken on certain contentious issues, and that was considered part of the National Post brand, I guess. We
Mm,
were never irresponsible. We never were hateful. We were never reckless or opinionated for opinion's sake. Personally, I never argued any subject or any corner of a subject without evidence that I considered to be persuasive, and good evidence, not from dubious sources, that sort of thing. And then I noticed that we all noticed political correctness was a big thing for the last couple of decades, but the Post seemed to have kept its brand fairly safe. A lot of people didn't like what the Post writers had to say, but they recognized that it was part of a spectrum of discourse that, whether you liked it or not, was certainly within the realm of acceptable, polemical behavior. And I think that started to change, that pressure started to be brought to bear on the editorial side of the newspaper. I can't pinpoint exactly. I just noticed that there seemed to be more tension
Mm,
around certain issues when I would attack points of view that are considered to be politically correct. I don't want to get into too many details or cite particular issues, but I will cite the one that caused me to leave. And that has been the growing, as you know, the whole gender
mm,
trans issue has
yeah.
become bigger and bigger for the last 5 years, especially since I think since 2015, it's become a very serious movement that has achieved tremendous power, political power, moral power in the last 5 years. And the movement's belief system has now become kind of standard issue in uh, professions and publication outlets that you would not have considered would have uh, kind of fallen for what is a theory-based movement.
Yeah.
And even in legislation, as you know, Bill C-16 entrenches in law gender identity as one of those rights
Hmm.
uh, that, have to be respected. And what's considered respect often goes beyond what people like me think. I mean, I think it starts to collide with the rights of others, and that's where you get the contentiousness and the controversy in those of us who write from the point of view of the rights, say, of women, women in sport, women in their intimate spaces, all that sort of thing.
I'd have to say that I agree with your concerns. I was recently reading about the whole Jonathan Jessica Yaniv, where we see a predator pretending to be transgender to get, his balls waxed or to take pictures in ladies' bathrooms. That is like something that the left was telling you, oh, don't worry about that. That's just a right-wing talking point. But it's happening. It's happening here in
Well,
Canada.
yes, okay. Well, you picked a good example because the Yaniv case is somebody who uh, that you wouldn't have to be right wing 10 years ago or 5 years ago even to say this is somebody who is mentally ill. This is not
Hmm.
somebody who thinks he's a woman. This is somebody who is mentally ill and is consumed by certain fetishes that are not only unhealthy but have but if indulged, um, can literally harm women and
Yeah.
more than psychological ways. And the waxing, the waxing episodes and his harassment of these 13 women was an extraordinary example in terms of self-delusion of the general population that could walk by that
Yeah.
example of terrible um, bullying. And a lot of these women were immigrant women for whom this low-paid work, relatively low-paid work, was the only way they could support themselves. Some were single mothers, and this very intrusive and very intimidating, harassment of them until it was resolved, thank heavens, in their favor. But during the time that he was harassing them, that was terrible and was not even reported, I should say.
Hey, you had a
Um,
publications ban on it, I think.
well, I don't, maybe on the court proceedings, but all the episodes as they were
Yeah.
happening, the CBC totally ignored it, for example. Other outlets were writing about it, and certainly the National Post was, and the Post Millennial, where I also write. The point is that nobody was coming out and saying, this guy is a creep. I mean, we
Hmm.
were saying it on Twitter, although you could get kicked off Twitter for saying
Didn't,
that.
yeah, I
And
think Lindsay Shepherd got banned from Twitter for calling out
yes,
Yaniv.
yes. I mean, he is a very strange and very, I would say, mentally ill person.
Yeah, I
Who,
agree.
but being mentally ill doesn't mean that you should be allowed on Twitter to be musing about. Well, I guess on Twitter, I guess you can muse about anything. But there was a double standard. He was on Twitter, musing about uh, tampon threads, how he fantasized about, you know,
Yeah.
seeing the young girls with, I don't want to get into it.
Yeah.
You saw the story. It's disgusting.
It's
It's any
horrible. It's
person, it's a very
really,
disgusting story. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So
horrible.
we were supposed to ignore it because for the sake of the movement, you know, and we don't want to, certainly wouldn't want to have put pressure on gender dysphoric people not to express themselves. I mean, whatever the reasons were. So that was a very good example of how this movement is got to have so much leverage in the media and everywhere. I mean, in
Yeah,
gender gender identity clinics everywhere. So it moved with the speed of summer lightning. And at first, you would simply get Twitter mobbed if you would say something like, "A man cannot be a woman," you know.
hmm
And so, you could be removed from. Well, Megan Murphy famously said, "A woman is a woman. You can't be a woman. A man can't be a woman," and she was banned or something like that, and she was banned from Twitter for life. And she was deplatformed, and she was, when she would come to speak and to say, a trans woman can be a trans woman, but she can't be a woman. You know, I mean, this whole business of appropriating language and who gets to say who's a woman. And
mm,
um, so it just became a very charged subject. And to be called a transphobe was suddenly almost as bad as being called a racist. So uh, the that was one issue on which I had to be very careful. And
yeah,
the
for sure.
presenting, yeah, but there were other issues too. And I was getting to the point where I felt I was becoming a burden to my editors. My editors never said to me, you know, we don't like what you're writing about and you better watch it or you're going to be fired. It was not like that. It was just I'd hand in my copy, and I wouldn't, normally it would have been up online within half a day. It
hmm
wasn't online. It wasn't online the next day. I wouldn't be hearing anything. And then it would turn out that it was going up the chain of editorial command. And what are we going to do with this? And it's so that started to happen with enough regularity that I became extremely uncomfortable. And I noticed it was affecting my writing in the sense that I was not enjoying writing, because every time I chose a topic, I would say, gee, is this a topic that's going to be spiked, which occasionally was happening? Um, or is this going to take a week to get to print? Or is this, and once you start asking those questions, you write as if you have somebody looking over your shoulder at what you're writing, and that sort of sucks pleasure out of writing.
Well,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
and
You're
I,
so right about that. And like for myself too, when I have these guests on my shows, when I wrote articles, I would always have a liberal read it over and ask me, do you think it's racist, sexist, or whatever? Because I don't want to be canceled. I'm only 17. I want to have a life. I don't want to, get mobbed. So it's for sure
well,
something that
that's tragic.
is,
That is tragic to me.
I
That at
know.
17, you have to be asking yourself whether you're going to be canceled by writing something about a belief that you sincerely hold. Where do you go to school?
So I actually go to a Christian school, so we're actually very open. We have, if some of the SJWs saw the honest class discussions that we have in our schools, their heads would blow because we can say what we want. It's very open. I'm so happy. The teachers are all conservative, so it's great for me on that matter. So the first time that I saw you, it was at last year's Manning conference here in Ottawa. And you were part of a panel that discussed how we can save history from the mob. Um, a lot has happened since that panel, with the killing of George Floyd, sparking a new anti-history mob mentality. What do you think that the people have gone from fighting racism to instead erasing history by tearing down statues and renaming entities? And do you think that there are long-term maybe effects or consequences to doing this type of behavior?
Well, let's go back to what it represents first. Why is this happening? I do not believe that, although the Black Lives Matter movement did start 4 years ago, partially with the idea of ending it. Certainly, ending racism was its, overall umbrella reason, and it was sparked by previous incidents with the police and black men who got killed in the course of being arrested or whatever. So there's no question that that's one component of it, is fighting racism. And there is racism to fight. Nobody's denying that. But the form that it has taken and morphed into in its alliance with the Antifa movement has proved that at heart, really, the impetus, and of course the founders of Black Lives Matter, BLM, they make they don't try to hide the fact. In fact, they're very proud of the fact that it is a Marxist movement, a revolutionary movement.
Yeah.
And like all revolutionary movements, the first thing you want to do is you want to start from zero. So that means erasing the past, because you believe that everything in the past was wrong, and you have the answer to make things right.
Mm-hmm.
So if your basic premise is that everything that happened in the past was wrong-headed or was the history of oppressors over those who are oppressed, and if that's the only story that you think history has to tell us, then sure, we should abolish history. Why shouldn't we, if that is true? It isn't true, but that's what they believe. So like all revolutionary movements, the trick is abolish the past, reframe the narrative about what has to be in the future, and justify getting rid of the people, the places, burning the books, pulling down the statues, changing the names, introducing a new kind of vocabulary that people are compelled to use. Because if you can compel people to say certain things, you're also compelling them to think certain things, and or to pretend that they think certain things. So that's the impetus behind this movement. It is revolutionary, and like all revolutions, there's a certain lust for blood in the streets by the principal. Those who have conceived the revolution, the intellectuals, basically. And then, of course, that's very appealing to those who believe they are a part of the oppressed class, and they join in behind. And so that's how you create a mob that feels that no matter what kind of damage they do is justified.
Absolutely. I mean, you're right what you said of BLM. I support ending racism. I support, equality and, fairness for all Black people, but I don't support the BLM movement because the co-founders are Marxists, trained Marxists. They are against the nuclear family, which is what is missing in a lot of Black households that many studies have shown leads to people not having the most successful lives. They don't have a father figure and so on. Some BLM activists are even thinking of changing how they change the schools so that the kids don't learn proper English. That would create more segregation, not less. So for that reason, I've come under fire for saying that I don't support BLM, but it's not because I don't support ending racism. It's just because I don't agree with what they're doing.
Yeah.
And you've talked also here about the Antifa. So I know you've been quite outspoken about Antifa. Last year, you wrote an article in the National Post called "Antifa Needs to be Called Out for What It Is: A Movement of Violent Totalitarian Thugs." Right now, Antifa is out and about terrorizing law-abiding Americans in cities like Portland. Unfortunately, Democrat politicians have defended Antifa by calling them peaceful protesters and have even persecuted those who try to defend their property against this dangerous mob. Why do you think that the Democratic Party has been unable to denounce like radical left-wing extremist groups like Antifa?
Well, it's interesting. I at this point, I think it's appropriate for me to be quoting one of the excellent conservative journalists of our age, John O'Sullivan. John O'Sullivan is a British journalist who actually was, when the National Post started, his friend Conrad Black invited him to come and be the editorial kind of mentor to the young editorial board members, many of whom had never worked for a newspaper before.
Mm-hmm.
And he stayed for about 4 months, and he whipped them into shape as editorialists. And that was amazing, because it was a great privilege to work under such a master journalist. And he said something, he said, if an institution or an organization does not stay expressly conservative, in other words, if it does not brand itself conservative and maintain its conservatism, it will inevitably drift to the left. And the reason he said that is because conservative organizations, they don't mind hiring or welcoming, or say conservative schools, they don't mind having dialogues with or admitting liberals into their institutions, because they believe in healthy debate. But the opposite is not true. A left-wing organization will very carefully patrol its borders to make sure that no conservatives get in, because they believe that they have the truth, not, an opinion. And if it is the truth, then no other opinion is legitimate. So what has happened in the Democratic Party is that you've got a generation, an upcoming generation that has forgotten, I shouldn't say forgotten, that has never learned about the crimes or the potential for criminality that comes only from the left. There are crimes that come from the right. We know all about those. They're very well schooled in fascism and Nazism and the Holocaust. They know all about that, but they don't know about the equally horrible crimes that were committed in the 20th century in the name of the left, or most revolutionary movements. So as a result, they think that if you talk about the excesses of leftist ideology, they'll say, yes, but that's because socialism hasn't really been tried,
it wasn't real socialism.
That wasn't real socialism.
Let us try a 20th time. We'll get it this time.
Yeah, we'll get it right. We'll get it right this time, even though nobody has ever gotten it right before. So look, these young people have lived through some difficult times that their parents did not. They went through the 2000, they were maybe trying to get, they were young when they lived through the 2008 horrible meltdown. And by the lesson that they took from that, and I don't blame them, was capitalism doesn't work. And maybe they saw their parents go bankrupt, or maybe they saw their house lose all its value, or maybe whatever. So now they came to university and they were sitting ducks for inculcation of Marxist ideology, which has been in the universities for the last 3 decades. There's pretty well no conservatives left at university. So anybody that has gone to university any time in the 21st century, or even in the 90s, has been pretty well under the authority and learning from professors who are deeply wedded to certain belief systems. It's not worth going into here, and I'm not even the one. I'm no authority on them. I myself am a student still learning about all the intricacies of postmodernism and all that. But the bottom line is that the idea of equality, you and I have a very different idea of equality from what the young people do today. We believe in equality of opportunity, and they believe that if there are inequalities in society of income or of proportionality in school or proportionality in certain professions and all that, which of course they also got from feminism. And now they just call it intersectionality, because so all the victims can be in one, sort of matrix. But the point is that this is the ultimate leftist belief, that if you are part of an identity group that is not represented amongst the power groups, you're an out group if you're not represented in the general population according to your proportionality. It's okay for more of you to be represented than is proportionate, but it's never okay for there to be less. Absolutely. So then you are one of the oppressed, and you are a victim, and you are, and yada, 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 which is not to say that there is not systemic um, inequality in the sense that uh, there are many Black people in the States have come from a long line of disadvantaged people going right back to slavery. So there's no question that a lot of people in capitalist societies do get a better running start at life than inner city Blacks. That's for sure. And nobody is or no rational person should try to say, oh, it makes no difference that I was born into wealth and I went to an Ivy League school, because, you know, of course it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference. And more white people have good luck in that respect than Black people do. So nobody's saying, or no rational person should say, too bad, you know, pull up your boot, you know, get yourself moving, do it all yourself. There have to be societal ways of helping people who got that crummy start and help them get better. But as you say, if there's only one narrative, if the narrative is simply, if you are not doing well in society, and there's a whole group of you that are not doing, that it's only because of racism, that's a lie just as much as it is to say that anybody can get ahead, no matter what kind of.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we need the balance to say,
Yeah.
hey, look, you mentioned one thing before that is very true, and that nobody's allowed to talk about, that family matters. And the nuclear family is your best indicator for, like, why did Michelle Obama succeed in life? It wasn't, I mean, her father was just, I think he was a railway conductor, or he had a very modest job. Her mother was a homemaker, but they were a united family, and they made sure she got an education. That gave her more privilege than anybody living in inner city Baltimore or Chicago or anybody else. So it wasn't because she was Black that, I mean, she was not held back from success because she was Black. So you can make it, obviously, in society if you have the right beginning.
Yeah, so absolutely. Like at my church, we have a couple African Americans. They born in the States, now they live in Canada. These people grew up with a very close relationship with God and Jesus Christ, and they had a family. And these people are engineers. They're really smart. They're well off. So, you know, it's possible. It's just about how somebody is brought in life, what values they're taught, how they're raised. I think that definitely has a big impact, because in the United States, skin color doesn't make you disadvantaged. The Indian Americans, Filipino Americans, Taiwanese Americans, they're richer on average than white Americans. So
yes, they are.
You know, it's not about, it's really something that I don't think a lot of people understand, that it's not about this pigmentation. It's about what's been enrooted into the culture, which a lot of it is for Blacks is due to past racism, but it's all about attitude too, about how do we move forward? Do we want to continue doing the things that are making us disadvantaged, or do we want to, you know, help ourselves succeed more?
Yeah, I mean, what you mentioned before, the answer is not to, the answer to, if people don't have self-esteem, if they don't have the advantages that they see around them in other people, the answer is not to say, well, we haven't had a good education, so it's better if nobody has a good education, then we'll all be equal. That kind of equality.
That's BS.
Well, or to say the nuclear family, we don't have, that's not ours, what we do. We have babies that have, so it's harmful to us if you keep saying that the nuclear family is important. That's the kind of victimhood you really don't want to encourage at all. You know, Matthew Arnold, I don't know if you've ever studied him yet, but you might if you study English literature, or Matthew Arnold was one of the, he wrote a book called Culture and Anarchy, and he talked a lot about culture, and he said culture, we should be learning the best that has been thought and said. And what he meant by that was the best writers and the best musicians and the best, and we should be sharing them with others. So this used to be the ideal when I went to school, like 100 years ago, was the great ideal, was that we thought we went to university in order to be taught the best that had been thought and said. And we did not feel that it was somehow wrong to rank, this is good, this is better, this is best in terms of art or thinking, or we weren't relativists. And we did not think that it was condescending for those who did understand the best that had been thought and said, to teach those, I think we were quite humble about what we didn't know. And we wanted to learn, and we felt, but you see, of course, now that's considered a very imperial kind of attitude, because that was the attitude that the British took with them to the colonies, was we have this long history of culture and education and writing and art and all that, and we are going to share it with people who have not had that advantage. But because they thought that their education, their culture was superior, they also thought that their race was superior. They did. But they still felt it was an obligation to share their language with those that they colonized. And one of the reasons that India is the powerhouse that it is today, and most Indians do recognize this, is because they have one common language. I mean, they have 400 Indian languages, but only one unites them all, and that's English. And they have an educational system that is based on, and they have a justice system based on the English system. And by the way, since Kamala Harris is now the VP candidate for the Dems, I think it's very interesting. She talks, people say, oh, a black woman, but it's true that her father is Jamaican, he's black, very successful person, but her mother, to whom she ascribes a great deal of her success, is an Indian, not only from India, but she is a Tamil Brahmin. And this is a very tiny segment of India. I think there's only about 2 million Tamil Brahmins, but they were a very elite class of people because they were fanatic about education, working hard. They have a tremendous work ethic, and very strict with their children and getting them educated and all that. They remind me very much of the Jews, who are also fanatic about making sure their kids get great educations and all that. So this too is the key to success, is having that kind of an attitude. And that's why Kamala Harris herself is so well educated and has such a great attitude towards getting ahead and success. She wasn't held back. She wasn't held back at all. She had a very privileged education. Matter of fact, she went to school, her high school, 4 blocks away from me, where I live, at Westmount High School. So this is a person who had a great deal of privilege, and her skin color wasn't an impediment for 5 minutes in her history. So it shows that it is about values.
Oh, it sure is. So now let's kind of switch topic and go back to a bit of cancel culture. So I know that you're a Zionist. However, there are some people that have criticized some of the large Zionist associations for using cancel culture to, silence those who have criticisms of Israel. So I want to ask you, do you think that people should be able to criticize, some aspects of the state of Israel or Zionism without being canceled? And where would you draw the line between criticism and anti-Semitism?
Okay, so I think it's very easy to know where to draw the line, because I think the person who gave us that tool is Natan Sharansky, the great Russian dissident who finally emigrated to Israel and ended up in Israeli politics and everything. And he said, it's very simple. You just it's like a checkbox of, there's three Ds: demonization, delegitimization, and double standards. So the 3 Ds. When you talk about Israel, are you demonizing Israel? Are you saying it's worse than any other nation, or it's especially horrible, or it's especially this, or are you telling lies about it, or are you using blood libels, that sort of thing. Delegitimization. Are you saying that Israel is the one homeland in the world, ethnic homeland in the world, that has no right to exist? Of all the ethnic homelands in the world, you're saying it's the only one that, even though it is indigenous, the Jews are indigenous to this piece of land, like other people have their indigeneity and other, you're saying that's the one? If you're saying that's the one that has no legitimacy, only that one, then you've spilled over from anti-Zionism to anti-Semitism. And 3 is the double standards. If you ask from Israel a higher standard of morality, a higher standard of military purity, a higher standard of whatever than you would ask of any other nation or of your own nation, then that is a sign that you've gone beyond criticism of Israel's policies or this or that policy. Most of the people that are anti-Zionist as a form of activism, like in other words, that aren't that it's not just a passing thought. If someone has dedicated a good deal of time to anti-Zionist activity, or if they are in a group that is dedicated to anti-Zionism, I can promise you, like BDS, for example, I can promise you that when you pin them to the wall and ask them, do you think Israel has a right to exist? They may hem and haw and they say, well, there should be one nation and it should be everybody living together. But that means essentially that it would be an Arab, not just another Arab nation with a lot of Jews living in it. If they say it has no right to be a state or a nation, then you know you're dealing with, and BDS is essentially, because they don't believe in the two-state solution. They believe in the erasure of Israel as a homeland for the Jews. If you don't believe that the Jews deserve a homeland, then you really have to examine your motives for thinking that.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And I mean, Israel is like compared to other countries in the Middle East, it's a model state, it's an example. We have a democracy, religious freedom. Israel treats Palestinians very well. And if somebody is saying that Palestine should replace Israel, I mean, in Palestine and other countries, you got Sharia law.
You have another failed state, in a failed Arab state in the region, and it'll be like all the other Arab states. There's no Arab state where Jews can live on equal terms with Arabs. So why would they think that suddenly Palestine was going to be the one? They're brought up to hate Jews. If you look at their children's school books, they start them when they're like, as soon as they can talk, they know how to spit when they say Jew. So how are these people going to, it's simply ludicrous. And it's very interesting when they take polls amongst the Palestinians, and they've asked them, who do you think, what nation is the most democratic nation on earth? 70% of Palestinians say Israel. Now that's very interesting. They know. And, their leaders are the ones that won't negotiate, that won't,
They've been offered, I think, their own state like
10
times or
times,
something.
10 times. They won't, no. They've been offered so many times, but as Abba Eban, who was Golda Meir's Secretary of State, said about the Palestinians, they never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And that they've proved that over and over again. So as a result, since they have demanded something that no group of so-called refugees or people that have lost a war, they've demanded so much more than any other group in their position has ever been offered in the history of the world, and they refuse to budge, and they refuse to give up any of their conditions, which they know are unacceptable to Israel. So they are going to end up in a very hard place. They already are, because history is passing them by. And what just happened a week ago with the normalization of relations between the United Arab Emirates and Israel, that is a stunning step forward, and shows that their Arab brethren have gotten fed up with them. they've been political pawns for a very long time, and the Arab states have realized they have other fish to fry, and that it's better to be an ally of Israel. The big enemy is Iran, and they know
Yeah.
that being an ally of Israel is going to be much more helpful to them than insisting on this fantasy that the Palestinians are going to take back the state of Israel. That's not going to happen.
No, it certainly won't. So the Conservative Party of Canada has just recently elected Erin O'Toole as their new leader. During the whole campaign, there was a left-wing media narrative that Andrew Scheer had lost the election because he was too conservative, and that the only way that the Conservative Party could ever win another election is if they became liberal light. However, Conservative Party members rejected that narrative. Leslie Lewis and Derek Sloan, who both had really strong free speech policies, did exceedingly well, broke
Mm.
all expectations. You know, Leslie Lewis won the popular vote on the second ballot and got a third of the points. Erin O'Toole decisively beat Peter MacKay on the third ballot. Peter MacKay was the only candidate without any plan to protect free speech. Do you think that this has sent a message to conservative politicians in this country that they must do more to protect free speech and to stop cancel culture? And if that's the case, do you think that we will see the Conservative Party of Canada become a stronger voice for free speech and against cancel culture?
Great questions. First of all, I myself was, although I was very impressed with um, Leslyn Lewis. I mean, she kind of came from nowhere. She does not have, she has all kinds of experience professionally in other ways, but has not had a political career up till now, and kind of zoomed out of the starting gate. And in fact, I did write a column about her last year, and I said, this woman is a poster girl for, you know, she's a woman, she's Black, she's, you know, got like tremendous charisma. She's got it all. I said, if
Yeah,
it weren't for her social conservative views, I'd say she had a shot. And I said, it's not that it's nothing to do with how I feel about her views at all. I just feel that the country is not ready for a prime minister who is openly socially conservative. And that day may come. But she was not going to let that stop her. I think she knew that this was never going to result in her becoming prime minister, but it put her in a fantastic spot for being a huge part of a new government
yeah,
and respected. And it did show, I think you're right, that this leadership campaign, it showed me, I was shocked that that I think Andrew Scheer's performance when he was attacked for his social conservative views convinced people that if you hold these views, there is no point in squirming around and being weak in your defense of them. If you
yeah,
either have them or you don't, and if you have them, you have to be proactive in putting people on the back foot, on the defense. I mean, that whole episode that he went through with, and you believed in gay marriage, you know, or you didn't believe in gay
yeah,
marriage. He should have had an answer ready, because he should have known that was coming, and
yeah.
he should have said, a whole lot of other people didn't believe in gay marriage. Barack Obama didn't believe in gay marriage. This one, he should have rattled off 10 people that didn't believe in gay marriage.
And some
And
liberals, I think, voted against that bill too.
that's right, they did, and he should have been ready with that. And he should have said, like, there's answers you can have, and he should have said, it doesn't matter how I feel about gay marriage today, it's the law, and I will uphold the law. And that's it. Let's move on. Next question. I think people were very frustrated. I think social conservatives know that these social conserv social conservatives know that the law about gay marriage is not going to be repealed.
No,
Abortion is not going to be suddenly uh, uh, abolished. I mean, you know,
yeah,
people know that. What they want is somebody that defends their right to say, I can hold a personal belief, and I can still lead this country in a way that benefits everybody and that obeys the law. Like, I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can say it. So what they really need is, Andrew Scheer was not a natural leader because he didn't have the stomach for the fight. He didn't have you've got to want, you've got to feel a certain confidence in yourself, and it's got to emanate from you. What I like about O'Toole, aside from his free speech commitments, and the fact that he's been very precise about certain policies that McKay wasn't. I like the free speech thing, but I judged him. I wrote a column about him for the Post-Millennial saying why I would vote for him as the leader. And I said, you can't always put your finger on it, but you know a leader when you see one. His self-presentation is one you can't rehearse yourself into natural leadership. It kind of shines out of you or it doesn't. And I think he projects that. And I think that that's what you need. He has confidence in himself, but he knows who he is. He knows what he wants. So I can see him as being somebody who will uphold at least the right for people that hold social conservative views to speak about them freely. And that's really, I think, what most conservatives want. They want the right for everyone to hold their views without shame, without feeling constantly marginalized and as if they are inferior beings, or that they are not. They don't hold that there are more morally pure people than them. You know, they want to be accepted, they want to be included, they want to be part of the team, even though they have to be realistic about what they can expect and what they can't. And I think O'Toole gives them that feeling that they're in the tent and they're not the bus boys, you know, like.
No, so, I agree with you. Aaron, I have a lot of respect for him. He came on this show. He came on, and I asked him very tough, one or two really tough questions, especially with like Jim, what he did with Jim Carhalios. He answered them like a man. He answered every single question, didn't make excuses. He was very clear, and I gained so much respect for him after that interview. He also made sure he was a unifier. He went to talk to people like Tanya Granick-Allen. He went to talk to Post-Millennial, True North. He really made himself look as is. I'm not above you. We are all in this together. For me, that really stood out. This man is, you know, a real leader. I feel connected to him, and that's why I think he will actually have a lot of success in the upcoming election. People will see him as a fellow Canadian.
I mean, you know, he's got an opportunity here because Trudeau has never appeared more weak, more corrupt, more lacking in, more adrift. He's had to load up Chrystia Freeland with so many
Minister of everything.
I mean, like what, from 5 to 9 in the morning, she's going to do finance, and then from 9 to 12, she'll be the deputy minister, and from then she might have lunch a half an hour, and then, you know, it's as if you're saying, oh yeah, well, you know, I mean, personally, I would have thought being a finance minister was a full-time job.
I thought too.
You know, being a deputy prime minister was a full-time job, but he's making it seem like you can just take on, you know, 7, 8. How many portfolios can you take before you're really saying, well, you know, this can be done. And you all you need is a few hours a day for this. Well, then if it's that easy to be a finance minister, why did you have one full-time before? You know. So,
not only that, but he has a bunch of useless ministers, like Minister of Diversity, Minister of Middle Class Prosperity. Why not you put these people in to fill the boots of Chrystia Freeland? I don't get it. It's as Pierre Poilievre said said the other day, we have a government full of elites and snobs, and I totally agree with that.
Well, I mean, it is a bit of a swamp, but the good news is that because of this, it's interesting. Pierre Poilievre, who I met at a friend of mine had a meet the candidate evening when he was going to be one of the candidates. And then the next week he dropped out, but I was very impressed with him, and I'm very impressed with what he's doing now. But he's got Trudeau very much on the back foot, and Trudeau's never looked so. If honestly, if O'Toole could somehow convince the Bloc to if they can get this confidence, him defeated in a confidence motion, it would be a perfect time for an election. Uh,
Yeah,
I really think he would have the wind in his sails at that point because Trudeau has just been a disaster on every front. People say he did a great job with the pandemic, but
I
I think,
disagree.
well, I mean, I disagree too, but I think there was a lot of luck involved there too. He, look, great, not great. He himself didn't really do much of anything. He passed that along to
He
other.
hid in his house.
I know, and then and he's really he's been on the defense now for quite some time. So it would be a great time for him to lose a confidence motion. I think the shine is off. Even the people, his diehard supporters, he's not the fair-haired boy anymore. Nobody wants to see his socks. Nobody wants to have him photobomb their picnics
Wedding.
and.
I just can't wait for a normal person to be prime minister again.
Yeah,
Lastly, before we close this interview off, having discussed a lot of the things we've discussed today, in so many ways, we are in a political, ideological, cultural, and societal war, with the left. Their agenda for Western society includes socialism, censorship, mob rule, subjective morality, atheism, the disregard for biology, feelings over facts, and total government control, basically. What is the best way for us to fight back against the left and their agenda and to win these crucial battles?
well, for one thing, you're in a good place to do that because you're not in the public school system, and you are not subject to the cancel culture mentality that
Mm-hmm.
keeps you staying silent because you're afraid to speak up, which is, of course, what is happening more and more to most kids your age. And you're not a
Yeah,
kid. Certainly, I can see that you're mature well beyond your years. But
thank you.
so I think it is really up to people like you who are in a place where you have the privilege, and it has become a privilege, unfortunately. It is a right, but a lot of people, they have the right, but it's they're not able to use it. But you can, and I think it's people like you who have to keep speaking out. What you're doing right now, interviewing people that feel similar to you. You're in the resistance, Ailey,
Mm-hmm.
and good for you. That's all you can do right now. We're in a war. We're Our troops are far fewer in number. Our materiel, the resources we have, are shrinking. The institutional platforms that we have are shrinking, and we have to find novel approaches to getting to people. And one of the only things that is going to change this system is people voting out those who are the vehicle for this rotten system, and bringing in people who think like us. But that's a very uphill climb, very uphill climb. First of all, in Canada, we are a nation of pretty passive people. We like law and order, but we also like peace. We like peace, order, and good government. We often don't get good government because we're too fond of peace and order. So we pay a high price to maintain that. And we don't march in the streets, and we don't burn down federal courthouses. We don't do any of that. But
Mm-hmm.
we also don't get out and learn and vote and get active. I'm not going to pretend that things are optimistic for our side. I don't think they are.
Yeah.
I think we're in the middle of a zeitgeist that hasn't burned itself out yet. And when you're in the middle of a zeitgeist, it's like a howling wind. You can stand up and put your hands up and say no, no, but at that wind, you're like a chip in the wind. You get picked up and thrown around. So
Yeah.
we're in the middle of it right now. You know, things end, and they do end eventually, and it's our job to do what we can to help it end faster. That's all we can do. Doing nothing is not an option
Mm-hmm.
because it's very painful, very painful. to watch people you know in academia or every day I have somebody I know either in academia or somewhere else telling me about a case of an academic who can't get something published in a journal or has not been allowed to invite a speaker, or you feel like the walls are closing in. And I felt that way a little bit when I resigned because I was not allowed, they were not going to print a column in which I was reviewing a book, not even, it wasn't even, I mean, it was my opinion, but I was simply reviewing a book by a scientist about the fact that there are two sexes, not 100.
Mm-hmm.
And that is now considered a year ago, that column would not have received a second look. And today they said, I'm sorry, we're not printing it. And I knew, I said, okay, there was nothing wrong with that column. It was a perfectly good column.
Yeah.
I said, we've come to a parting of the ways. So that's how fast it's happening. But
Mm-hmm.
there is hope, because I hear voices all the time, and I see things on Twitter that wouldn't have been allowed 2 years ago or a year ago. And they are being allowed now. There's too many voices out there pushing back.
Yeah.
So, I have a mixed message. I don't see near future hope, but I do see that this cannot go on forever. We're in the midst of a delusion, a mass delusion. It has to come to an end, because it's got to go one way or the other. Either we end up, with a new Lenin coming along, or as the Dems seem to be that way headed. Sorry. Or I mean, America. I can see that America could implode. I really do. I'm very frightened for America. I
Yeah, it's
watch.
pretty scary to watch what's going on down there. Like there's
Dreadful.
just
Dreadful.
Yeah. Well, Barbara, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. You've shared so much great insight and so much great wisdom with me and the viewers. And, I wish you the best of luck. Please continue writing your columns. I enjoy reading them. And I think a lot of people do. And, I'm glad that you're still fighting despite those closing walls of
As long
political
as I
correctness.
can. Believe me, I have no intention of fading into the woodwork quite yet, but time is going to be the only thing that defeats me. So thank you so much, Ailey. It was a pleasure to meet you, a pleasure to be on your show, and hope you'll get a few viewers to look at it.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed our interview. If you want to learn more about Barbara Kay, check the link to her website in the description. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and like this video. Thank you, and God bless.